We will stay in Canberra now and catch up with Labor's Senator Kimberley Kitching from Victoria. Thanks for joining us, Senator. Let's stick on the IR thing. As the Minister then explained there are provisions under the law already for these deals to be struck, but only if unions, workers and employers agree. You'd be pretty happy with that, wouldn't you?
Well, I think there's different parts to it. So the withdrawal from amalgamation we will support, but it's just actually gone into the Senate just shortly before we're speaking now.
This is breaking up the CFMEU.
There is that, and we're fine. This is a sort of a technical issue, and we would be fine with that. But we do, obviously, if we want to have some amendments, we're going to look at that because, of course, we only have seen the legislation today. The other part of that is, of course, this, supposedly coronavirus-related part, but the language is very vague and quite broad, Chris, and I think that what we're seeing is a government that is hopefully, we would hope, not using the cover of a pandemic to change industrial relations laws, because what we also know that in this country, a third of Australians are in casual or insecure work. And so everyone, I would imagine every Australian knows someone who is in that kind of work. And I think what we need to do is ensure that those people are not worse off and not to use the pandemic to cover this. So if I could give you an example, in Melbourne, obviously, there were lots of businesses, restaurants, cafes that really converted to takeaway businesses. They could only do takeaway. So what we would see is that really this law is saying that any business that's been impacted by the coronavirus, not necessarily negatively impacted, it just says impacted, which is why I say that the terms are very broad.
Yeah, it's not I think some of the rhetoric around this stuff really does my head in, right? Because you have a lot of people on the left, unions, Labor Party, Greens even today, virtually saying that the government wants to cut people's wages. Now, you might think that the Coalition and Scott Morrison are the most evil people on the planet, but no sensible politician or government manager wants to cut people's wages. There's nothing in it for them. They actually want people to get jobs and they want wages to grow. That's surely obvious.
Well, you can say that, that they want people to get jobs, but what we know is that this government hasn't really done a lot for Australian workers over the entire course of this government, the 7 years or nearly 8 years it has been in power.
They're wanting to change these laws to try and help people get... surely no one on the Labor or the union side actually seriously thinks a coalition government wants people not to get work or wants people to be paid less.
Chris, we can look at, let's take a look at a restaurant, a casual staff member at a restaurant. If that business, and I would say that most restaurants and cafes within Australia have been affected by coronavirus, but, the word impact is not really defined. It doesn't necessarily mean negatively. But if there is a possibility that maybe, that restaurant owner says, well, I can sort of save some money here and there, then they might do that and they might be able to use this legislation, which is coming to the Senate a little later on, to do that. So I think we need... Sorry,
Senator, but the point there being, if there was a situation such as that, they wanted to change the arrangements and it might impact on hours worked or pay rates, under the law, then not only... The business can't just impose that. They've got to get agreement with the workers and the union if that's involved as well. So how can that be a problem if they strike a deal between those three parties?
Well, I think that there are sometimes in some workplaces, not all, but some workplaces where people have very uneven bargaining power. And sometimes, Chris, people want to keep jobs and they'll agree to lower conditions because they want to keep that job. And I can tell you that there are some workplaces that do have that. And I think that we want to ensure that workers are, because as you say, who would ever want someone to be worse off? But we do know that there are sometimes, people want to make, sometimes they want to make a buck at other people's expense. We know that that's also a part of it. So
we know
I think
this.
We need to take a better examination. We need to have a better examination of this legislation. We have only just received it today and it's going through today. So it seems that this is sort of being done in quite a rush. And also remember that the government said that they would consult unions, businesses and government They haven't consulted with the opposition. One might want to think that this kind of legislation that is going to affect every worker in Australia, that would have been there would have been some bipartisan consultation.
We are nearly out of time, Senator. Just briefly, in 2 words or less, are you going to support the digital giants legislation to force them to pay for news content?
Look, we're not. We think content that is being produced here in Australia, that should be paid for. We know that those Google and Facebook are using that content and monetising it. So we think it's only fair that everyone from Sky to News Corp to the Age SMH to the ABC and SBS, that those journalists should be compensated for
even those
excellent content.
The ABC, hey? Even those, they can double dip. Fair enough.
Look,
we are sorry, right out of time. I appreciate
well, Australian journalists are very clever and great. I think they're fantastic. So,
yeah,
that's.
Thank
so
you.
I think they should be compensated.
They sure should be. Thanks very much for joining us. Senator Kimberley Kitching there.
Thanks,
from the Australian Labor Party, Victorian Division. Yes, and the ABC are going to get some money out of the digital giants too if all this goes down. I reckon they should cut their public funding for all the dollars they get in, but it's not going to happen. They're going to get some extra funds. I suppose it'll stop them whinging, won't it?